This section is reserved for actual first-class guests. The restaurant manager said it loud enough for the bar to go silent. Celeste Rowe hadn't even reached the host stand yet. She was still pulling her carry-on, fresh off a 10-hour flight from Paris, blazer draped over one arm, when the words stopped her cold. The manager blocked her path, arms crossed, face set. "You can try the cafe down by Gate C. They have more affordable options." Behind her, a white couple in sneakers and yoga pants walked right in. No boarding passes shown. The hostess smiled. "Welcome back, Mr. Collins." Celeste said nothing. She didn't explain that she had a platinum elite boarding pass in her pocket. She didn't flash her airport security badge. She didn't mention that she owned the system that stocked their damn food truck. She just nodded once, turned away, and walked out of the Delta room, back straight. Steps quiet, dignity intact. But something inside her shifted, something sharp, familiar. She'd felt it before, when her mother was denied service at a roadside diner in 1987. Back then, she was 11, helpless. Now, she wasn't 11 anymore. Celeste found a seat near Gate C17, opened her laptop. The screen blinked, then loaded a dark interface labeled Stratos EthixNet. Her fingers didn't hesitate. Location, ATL, Terminal A. Vendor, Delta Room Violation, Tier 1. Public Discrimination, Action, Redline Protocol, Execute. She leaned back, watched the screen flash red, and just whispered to herself, 7 minutes. That's all it took. Have you ever been told you didn't belong in a place you paid for? Drop A in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. Celeste Rowe was 11 the first time she realized silence could be loud. Her mother stood at the counter of a roadside diner just outside Birmingham, Alabama. They'd saved for weeks, just enough for 2 grilled cheese sandwiches and a shared milkshake. It was supposed to be a treat after Celeste's spelling bee. The waitress looked at them, then looked past them. "We're closed," she said flatly, wiping down a menu that had been handed out just seconds before. There were still people eating, white people. Celeste remembered the way her mother didn't argue. She just stood there a moment too long, back straight, eyes calm, and then turned to leave. That silence, that was the sound of swallowed dignity. As they walked back to the car, Celeste whispered, "Why didn't you say anything?" Her mother smiled, tired, "Because one day you will." That was the moment. Not a speech, not a fight, just a quiet seed planted in a little black girl who learned that day what "don't belong here" really meant. Celeste didn't forget. She grew up chasing the places she wasn't supposed to be. Engineering scholarships, MIT, a logistics job in Dubai that no one thought she'd survive. She didn't just learn how supply chains worked. She learned how systems protected some people and excluded others. She didn't ask for permission. She built Stratos Link from scratch, now the invisible infrastructure behind 42 major airports. But power alone wasn't enough. So she created EthixNet, a platform that rated vendors not just on efficiency, but on ethics. When she pitched it to federal boards, they smiled politely, then shelved it. Too aggressive, too ambitious, too much accountability. Now, here she was, 35 years after that diner. Different airport, same stare, same assumption, same quiet dismissal. Except this time she had the system, and she just pulled the lever. By the time most people at the Delta room had forgotten the woman they just turned away, the ripple had already begun. At 6:43 p.m., Celeste's assistant, Sierra Graves, was halfway through her layover in Denver when her secure line buzzed. One glance at the alert, and Sierra sat up straight. The subject line read, "Redline Protocol, activated, ATL Terminal A Delta Room." She didn't ask questions. She just opened her terminal, authenticated with retina scan, and started shutting doors. In under 4 minutes, the system that silently powered vendor access to 7 major airports began to tighten. Food delivery requests were auto-rejected. Inventory clearances were paused. An emergency compliance audit was triggered. Delta Room's back-end supply chain, the one they never thought about, had just gone dark. Inside a quiet operations center in Northern Virginia, an alert pinged on the screen of Miles Huang, Director of Ethics Enforcement for Stratos Link. His eyebrows lifted. He hadn't seen a Tier 1 protocol in over a year. He called no one, said nothing. Just entered the override. Request full video plus audio logs, ATL Gate A, past 45 mins. Back in Atlanta, the staff at the Delta Room started noticing things. The 7 p.m. produced shipment never arrived. The lamb they prepped for Flight 228, sitting cold on the dock. And when the kitchen manager tried to log into the inventory portal, access denied. He thought it was a glitch. He had no idea the system was already watching, already recording, already flagging them, line by line. At exactly 6:52 p.m., Celeste received a confirmation ping on her phone. Redline confirmed, vendor flagged, Tier 1 violation under review. She didn't smile. She didn't even blink. She just sipped her tea and whispered to herself, "This isn't revenge. It's correction." By 7:15 p.m., the Delta Room was buzzing, and not in a good way. The produce shipment from Systech Logistics never showed. The lamb chops meant for Flight 228 sat thawing, unclaimed. And when the kitchen manager tried to log into the supplier dashboard, the screen flashed red. Access denied. He hit refresh. Again, nothing. Then the wine order, 12 crates of Burgundy for a high-profile charter, was rejected. Vendor temporarily suspended from system, the notice read. Temporarily? Suspended by who? No one knew. And that's when the whispers started. In the back office, General Manager Travis Langford slammed his phone down. "Why the hell is nothing moving?" He barked at no one in particular. The head chef peeked in. "We're 30 minutes from service and I've got 0 protein on site." Travis called the airport's F&B coordinator. Straight to voicemail. He called Systech, Hold Music. He called the only number he had for Stratos Link. A woman answered. "Operations," she said flatly. "I need someone to explain why our entire supply chain just got locked out," Travis said, trying to sound assertive but already sweating. A pause. Then the voice returned, calm, surgical. "Sir, your vendor ID has been flagged under Tier 1 ethics violation. The system is responding accordingly." "What violation?" Travis snapped. "Public discrimination. Recorded, verified, logged." And then, click. Travis stood frozen. The blood drained from his face. Around him, staff scrambled, servers pacing, chefs on edge. Guests already seated, but no entrees plated. Nothing made sense. Everything was falling apart at once, because it wasn't just a glitch. It wasn't a missing shipment. It was a signal. A silent, precise message from someone they didn't even know was in the room. And 7 minutes after turning her away, that someone had pulled a thread that unraveled everything. Travis Langford had just started yelling at the Systech dashboard when the front doors opened. 3 people walked in, 2 women and a man, all dressed in dark suits, all moving with the kind of calm that unsettles a room. But it was the 4th person who made everyone stop breathing. Celeste Rowe, not in leggings this time, not in travel flats. She wore a tailored black pantsuit, gold watch, posture like royalty. And when she entered, the room changed. Travis blinked. "Can I help you?" Celeste didn't respond. She just stepped aside and let the woman next to her speak. "I'm Olivia Brooks, Chief Compliance Officer with Stratos Link. This is a formal ethics inspection," she said, presenting a digital badge. "We're here to address a Tier 1 violation at this location." Tier 1. That phrase again. Travis forced a laugh. "This has to be a mistake. We've served thousands of customers. We don't discriminate." Celeste tilted her head. "You do," she said softly. "You just didn't know who I was." Recognition didn't hit Travis right away. But when it did, he nearly staggered. Celeste pulled out her phone and tapped twice. The lobby screen, normally showing flight schedules, flashed. A logo appeared. Stratos EthixNet Administrator Access, Celeste Rowe. The room froze. "I walked into this restaurant as a customer," she said. "I was told I didn't belong. I was dismissed. Publicly." Travis tried to stammer out an apology. Celeste cut him off. "You didn't just insult me. You insulted every black woman who's ever been told they're not premium enough." Her voice wasn't angry. It was steady, cold, focused. "And now," she said, turning toward the team behind her, "we audit everything." By the next morning, the Delta Room wasn't just a restaurant. It was a case file, an example, a warning. The Tier 1 violation triggered by Celeste Rowe had officially moved from internal flag to public audit. Within 12 hours, 3 other locations affiliated with Delta Room's parent company were placed under ethics review. By 9 a.m., 2 national airlines announced they were pausing food service contracts pending quality control concerns. By noon, FAA and IATA had received formal requests to reevaluate their partnerships with vendors that had low EthixNet compliance scores. This wasn't a press release. This was structural collapse. But Celeste didn't take a victory lap. She didn't call reporters or tweet a thread. She was already in a meeting with the Department of Transportation and a representative from the Global Transit Hospitality Board. On the screen behind her, Passenger Dining Ethics Charter, draft for immediate adoption. It was the same proposal she'd submitted 3 years ago, the one they'd shelved without comment. Now they were listening. "Respect," Celeste said, calm and steady, "should never be optional. Not in the sky, not on the ground, not based on who's holding the fork." She wasn't angry. She was precise. The board members looked tired. They knew what was coming. The public sentiment was shifting. The EthixNet dashboard, which had once been seen as too radical, was now their life raft. By 5 p.m. that same day, 12 airports had signed on to adopt the Redline Early Detection Protocol. The change was happening. Fast. Meanwhile, back at the Delta Room in Atlanta, the ripple was now a wave. 3 managers were placed on administrative leave. 2 vendors pulled out entirely. Customers walked by the lounge, whispering, pulling out phones, reading headlines like, "Black CEO shuts down 620-man supply chain after being denied a table." The same manager who had once turned Celeste away was now handing over her key card. Her desk was cleaned out before her shift ended. In a quiet hallway, one of the servers who had said nothing during the original incident approached Celeste. I saw what happened," she said, eyes low. "I wanted to say something, I didn't know if I'd still have a job." Celeste looked at her, not with judgment, but clarity. "You still do," she said, "but now you also have a responsibility." The woman nodded, holding back tears. By the end of the week, Celeste's office had received over 1,400 messages, some from workers in the aviation industry, others from everyday passengers. "Thank you. I've waited my whole life to see someone do this. My daughter saw the story and asked if she could be like you." Celeste read each one, but she didn't feel pride. Not yet. Because this wasn't about a table, or even a restaurant. This was about every place that still thinks dignity is earned by skin tone, or income, or whether you walk in alone or with a last name that matters. That night, as she sat alone in her quiet DC apartment, tea in hand, Celeste opened a folder labeled EthixNet Phase 2, Global Rollout. She looked out at the city skyline and said, almost to herself, "Let's make sure this never happens quietly again." If you believe policy changes more than hashtags, type Phase 2 in the comments. And tell us where you're watching from. 1 month later, Celeste returned to Atlanta. Not with an entourage, not for press, not even to follow up. She booked a quiet morning flight, wore jeans and a navy cardigan, and walked the concourse like any other traveler. No one stopped her. No one recognized her. And that was exactly the point. She paused in front of the lounge once known as The Delta Room. It had a new name now, gate and table, and a new mission posted proudly on the glass. Every traveler, every story, every seat earned by dignity, not appearance. Inside, the staff was mixed. Young, old, black, white, Asian, Latino. The room was warm, welcoming, real. Near the back, a black mother sat with her daughter, maybe 8 years old. They were laughing over pancakes and coloring on the kids' menu. A server brought them hot chocolate with extra whipped cream and a smile that didn't feel forced. Celeste stood there longer than she meant to. That same ache was still in her chest, but it felt softer now. She remembered her own mother, standing silent in a dusty Alabama diner, being turned away with the quiet grace of someone who knew the world wasn't built for her, but also knew that one day, her daughter might be the one to change it. Celeste didn't walk in. She didn't need to. She just nodded to herself, turned slowly, and headed for her gate. One change, one restaurant, one promise kept. That was enough. For today. By the end of the second week, it was no longer just about the Delta Room. The ripples had become waves. The Redline Protocol, once a little-known feature buried deep inside the Stratos EthixNet platform, had now become the most feared trigger in the U.S. aviation hospitality industry. It wasn't just vendors talking. Executives were holding emergency meetings. Airline CEOs were demanding compliance reports. Airport authorities were asking one question over and over. What's our EthixNet score? And if the answer was anything less than compliant, things started moving. Fast. In San Francisco, a boutique lounge that refused service to a Sikh couple the week prior was flagged. The next morning, EthixNet classified them as Tier 2 violators. Within 48 hours, 2 major suppliers pulled out of their contract. In Miami, a VIP food vendor was cited for failing to accommodate a disabled passenger's meal request. 3 airlines canceled their onboarding orders. Their entire 88-number Q3 projection vanished overnight. These weren't stories buried in industry memos anymore. CNN, Forbes, even the New York Times ran front-page headlines. The ethics engine quietly rewriting air travel. She didn't raise her voice. She just shut down the system. Power without volume, the silent authority of Celeste Rowe. Celeste never asked to be in the spotlight. She never gave interviews, never posted about it. Her social media stayed silent. But that didn't stop people from talking. One clip from airport security footage, her walking out of the Delta Room with her back straight and head high, was reshared over 11 million times. It became a symbol, not of anger, not even of revenge, but of precision, of a black woman who didn't yell, didn't demand, didn't threaten. She just typed 7 words, and the system obeyed. Meanwhile, within Stratos Link headquarters, things were evolving. The EthixNet team added a public transparency dashboard, allowing passengers to check vendor scores before choosing lounges or meals. A quiet revolution was happening. Vendors who used to pride themselves on exclusivity were now redesigning their training programs. Some hired third-party diversity consultants. Others reached out to community leaders asking for help. Not because they got caught, but because they saw what happened when someone like Celeste didn't just complain, she rewrote the rules. One board chair put it plainly during a live broadcast. There are loud disruptions. Then there are structural shifts. Celeste Rowe gave us the second kind, and while she stayed quiet, others began to speak up. A flight attendant in Dallas, a black chef in Boston, a disabled traveler in Toronto, all sharing stories of being made to feel invisible in places where they paid to be present. Now, they had a language. They had precedent. They had EthixNet. By month's end, 19 airports across North America and Europe had formally adopted EthixNet as a compliance benchmark. $620 million in vendor contracts were either frozen, redirected, or revised. 3 executive resignations were quietly filed. 2 hospitality boards updated their codes of ethics for the first time in over a decade. Celeste didn't need credit. She needed impact. And she got it, without shouting, without a press conference, just with a single truth. The quietest person in the room might be the one who owns the room. By the third week, they started showing up. Emails at first, soft language, vague apologies. We'd love to open a dialogue. We take these matters seriously and are committed to growth. Then came the calls. Then, the requests for private meetings. One by one, the same vendors and executives who once ignored Celeste's emails now wanted time on her calendar. The parent company behind the Delta Room offered a statement calling the incident a moment of miscommunication. They suggested reinstating their partnership with Stratos Link under mutual review. Celeste didn't flinch. She read the email, then sent a one-line reply. Submit a revised compliance plan. Then we'll talk. They replied within 3 hours. It wasn't just them. 2 multinational airline catering groups requested a meeting with her team. A private hospitality conglomerate from Dubai offered to license EthixNet across its lounges in the Gulf region. People who once thought ethics tracking was just PR fluff now understood it for what it really was. A new currency, a gatekeeper, a standard. But Celeste wasn't interested in being flattered or feared. She wasn't building a personal brand. She was building infrastructure, the kind that didn't bend for convenience. So she created a condition. If you want back in, you don't just sign a paper, you sign the protocol, you implement it, report it, and live by it. She called it the Stratos Accord. 12 pages, 3 mandatory compliance levels, quarterly audits, and a required ethics training module written not by lawyers, but by passengers who'd experienced real discrimination in transit spaces. One executive balked. "This feels punitive," Celeste responded, calm and even. "No, punishment is temporary. This is correction." By the end of the month, 11 companies had signed the Stratos Accord. 4 were still under review. Celeste wasn't rushing. She understood something they didn't. Change done quickly for headlines rarely lasts. Change done slowly, systemically. That's how empires shift. At a panel in Brussels, she was asked, "What made you respond with policy instead of outrage?" Celeste smiled faintly. "Outrage fades," she said. "Policy forces memory." 2 months after the Delta Room incident, Celeste sat alone in a quiet federal conference room in Washington, D.C. The walls were lined with seal-stamped folders. On the long table in front of her was a crisp, official packet. Letterhead, Department of Transportation, Ethics and Compliance Division. Subject, Senior Federal Advisor Nomination, Transit Hospitality Reform. They wanted her, not just to consult, not just to contribute, but to lead. To be the face of a new nationwide initiative to embed anti-discrimination protocols and ethics architecture into every federally regulated hospitality space. Airports, lounges, vendor chains, service terminals. She'd have a seat at the table, funding, staff, a title. They told her she would be the new voice of ethical travel. Celeste took a breath and slid the packet back across the table. "I appreciate the offer," she said quietly. "But I didn't do this to become a symbol." The room went still. A senior official tried again. "You'd have influence, national reach. You could shape federal travel standards for decades." Celeste smiled politely. "I already did," she replied. Outside the building, her driver waited curbside. Inside her coat pocket was a single folded note. The last thing her mother had ever written her. "Don't force the world to see you. Make it feel you." Celeste didn't want applause. She wanted function. Systems that didn't rely on outrage to act right. That same week, she submitted a 3-page proposal to the Federal Ethics Council. It wasn't flashy. No big speeches, no bold campaigns, just a single condition. Any organization found in repeated violation of the EthixNet protocol shall lose federal partnership eligibility and terminal leasing rights at FAA-regulated airports. Translation: if you keep discriminating, you don't get space. Not in the air, not on the ground, not with taxpayer funding. The council voted 6-1 to adopt it. No photo ops, no press, just a quiet policy shift that changed everything. By the end of that month, Over 31 airports and transit hubs began integrating EthixNet into their vendor licensing criteria. And as for Celeste, she went back to work. She met with engineers, coders, analysts. They weren't chasing fame. They were building quiet checks into noisy systems. Her official title? Still CEO of Stratos Link. Unofficially, people started calling her the Architect of Dignity. Weeks later, a young black intern in the Department of Transportation ran into her in an elevator. She fumbled her words at first, then whispered, "Just so you know, I've never felt safe in these buildings, until I heard what you did." Celeste didn't offer some grand response. She just gave a knowing look, nodded once, and said, "Then we're just getting started." It was a cloudy Thursday when Celeste landed in Montgomery, Alabama. She didn't bring a team. No press, no board members. Just a tote bag, a leather journal, and a quiet purpose. She rented a car and drove 40 minutes down a familiar road. One she hadn't traveled since she was a child, sitting in the back seat of her mother's old Honda. At the edge of town stood the same roadside diner her mother had once taken her to, only to be told, "We don't serve your kind here." Celeste was 5, too young to understand the words, old enough to never forget the look in her mother's eyes. Now, decades later, the diner had a new name, Junction Café. It was under new ownership, part of a local southern chain that had just signed on to the EthixNet protocol 3 months ago. She stepped inside. A young black hostess smiled warmly and said, "Table for one?" Celeste nodded. The dining room wasn't fancy. Vinyl booths, checkered floors, but it was clean, respectful, and full of quiet dignity. A Latino father fed pancakes to his toddler in a booster seat. An older white couple complimented the waiter's kindness. 2 Muslim women sat in the corner sharing sweet tea and laughter. No one looked twice at Celeste, and that was the point. She took a corner seat by the window, ordered coffee and a biscuit, wrote one line in her journal. She'd be proud. The manager came by near the end of her meal. "Just doing table checks," he said casually. "You doing okay, ma'am?" Celeste smiled gently. "Better than okay." He didn't know who she was. Didn't need to. And she wasn't about to tell him. Because real power, it isn't about being recognized. It's about walking into a space that once rejected you and realizing the room finally knows how to behave, even if it doesn't know your name. She paid in cash, left a generous tip, and walked out into the gray afternoon light. No headlines, no applause, just a quiet, full circle. A month later, Celeste sat in her home office overlooking a quiet Atlanta skyline. It was almost midnight. The city hummed softly outside. Inside, her screen glowed with the final draft of the EthixNet Annual Ethics Memo, set to be distributed to every vendor, lounge manager, and executive under federal airport contracts. She didn't title it policy. She called it memory, because to her, that's what this all came down to. Not politics, not punishment, not even justice, just memory. A system that remembers what it did wrong, so it won't repeat it. A structure that holds not only data, but dignity. Not because people yell, but because the code remembers why silence mattered. She added a short note at the end, just 97 words. No name, no signature, no brand. To those who've ever been told they didn't belong, in a room, in a lounge, at a table they paid to sit at. I didn't write these rules to give you power. You already had that. I wrote them to remind the system not to forget you again. My name doesn't matter. Yours does. And if one day a child walks through a door that once rejected their parent, and the door opens freely, that's enough for me. That's the win. She hit send. The memo went live at 12:03 a.m. By dawn, it was being read in 42 airport systems, 19 countries, and across 6 global hospitality consortiums. But Celeste? She closed her laptop, made tea, stepped out onto the balcony as the sun began to rise over Georgia. No news cameras, no trending hashtags. Just one woman watching the day begin, knowing somewhere a door that once stayed shut might now stay open. Because she never wanted credit. She just wanted the next person to walk in and not feel the heat of judgment before the warmth of service. And if the world forgot her name, that was fine. As long as the system remembered the lesson. Narrator's voice, soft and steady. If you've ever walked into a place and felt like you didn't belong, if you've ever been made to feel invisible, even when you paid to be present, this story was for you. Tell us, have you ever experienced a quiet kind of injustice? The kind that didn't make the news, but stayed with you for years? Drop your story in the comments. Type, "Dignity lives here," if you believe silent strength still changes the world. And as always, tell us where you're watching from. We read every single one. This is Telltales, where silence isn't weakness, it's power waiting to be seen.